To make a move like that, you have to have kahunas and conviction.
Long term, I'm bullish. We could see about a 20% correction next year.
This is Josh Jelinski, the financial quarterback. Don't touch that dial. So I've seen this problem with many clients and listener friends over the years. They retire. Some of them can find a job in their second act. I think of a dear Wall Street executive, depressed after she retired, and then she found a second gig as a travel agent. Is now a luxury travel agent, getting significance, helping couples plan their honeymoons, people plan their trips of meaning. And it really, you wouldn't have thought, hey, Wall Street executive turned travel advisor, but she's doing a heck of a job at it. Then I've remember another guy, he retired early. Then he was so depressed, he then went back to work because he said, hey, I'd rather, drive my wife crazy. What are some tips for people who are retiring so they don't go crazy when they retire? And I don't mean that to be, it happens. I mean, it happens more than, I know some of my oldest living clients who don't need to retire are people who kind of have these side gigs. I'm thinking of a 90-plus-year-old man who I think he worked till he was like 89, just retired last year. So it does really help. Working helps build significance and meaning. What are tips for people as they're transitioning?
Yeah, I think that's really insightful, and I appreciate those stories about your experiences with your clients as well. In the book, I identify kind of what you're speaking of as a plan B. And ultimately, what happens, the statistics would reveal that over 40% of retirees will experience some sort of anxiety or depression within the first 6 months of retirement. And if we would drill in as to why is that? Well, I think it really has to do with the human, us humans are resistant to change. And this is a big change. So often our identity is wrapped up into our careers. And so if I were to ask you, who are you? It's very easy to say who you are by your title. I'm a doctor. I'm a lawyer. I'm a financial advisor. I'm a nurse. But when your career is behind you and you're retired, if I ask you who are you and you can't use your career as an answer to that question, it can be very unsettling. And I don't know. I'm not sure who I am. You see, in your career phase, you spend so much time climbing the corporate ladder, raising a family, making sure you're paying the mortgage, that when that question occurs, who am I? You can crowd it out. It's very easy to crowd it out in the busyness of life. But in retirement, when things slow down and you don't have a 40+ hour per week job, when that question occurs, who am I? You can't hide it. You have to come face to face with that question and identify who you are apart from your career. And so what we often encourage is for clients and retirees to identify their values. We actually take clients through a values exercise where we give them a card deck of 52 cards and they start to identify, I'm not this, I am this, I'm not this. And the bottom line, they get to their top 5 core values of what they identify with. And from there, they can start to say, hey, this is who I am. I am passionate about literacy. I am passionate about the environment. I'm passionate about building into the next generation of my grandkids. And once you identify what that is, a plan B becomes very, it reveals itself very easily so that your Wall Street executive can be that travel agent. So that next client can transition from a lawyer to being an awesome grandfather to their kids. And so those are the questions that we really ask our clients to ensure that they transition into something that's next for them.
So let's talk about some of those questions. What are the questions you ask?
Yeah. Oftentimes I would be quick to say too that not only does the statistics reveal that 40% of retirees will have depression or anxiety, but also that divorce rates will spike within the first 2 years of retirement. And that's oftentimes because you're used to a bit of healthy separation between during your career phase to now being together all the time. And if you and your spouse or you and your significant other aren't on the same page of what's next for you, that can really cause some major issues. So the questions that we really start to ask is, what's important to you? What pulls on your heartstrings? How do you want to leave? Your race isn't complete. What legacy, what impact on this world do you want to have on your family, on your community, on your state, on your country, for you to feel as though you finished well? And so we really just start to vision cast alongside our client to take maybe the skills that they've gathered from a 30-40 year career and be able to continue to bless humanity with them in the next phase.
Have you ever gotten people go, oh, it sounds nice, but I came to you wanting to know about a Roth or a 529 or an annuity or, life insurance or IRAs, 401ks. This vision casting is a little too much. It's too uncomfortable.
Yeah. We absolutely have, Josh. And I'll tell you what, and when that happens, one of two things will happen. Number one, I'll tell this story. I'll tell the story I just told you and your listeners today, and they'll start to be like, oh, seriously, this matters. Maybe I wanted that Roth conversion, but you're bringing something up that I hadn't really considered. And oftentimes that's what our financial industry is very good at doing. You need to, the financial side of retirement is very, very important. And Josh, I know you have a lot of designations, and that's appropriate. I'm so glad that you're able to serve your clients well with those. The financial side is right, and the non-financial side needs considered. So if after I've told that story of how my mom was impacted, she had enough money to sleep at night, but not enough purpose to get up in the morning. If that doesn't impact them, then we simply stick with the numbers, and we honor that and we move forward. But oftentimes a client will start to take a deep breath. They'll put their head back and start to consider, you know what, maybe this really matters, and I should do the hard work of deciding what I'm transitioning to.
So I sit down with you. How do you, what do you say to me? I mean, I've heard different, the only reason why I'm curious is over the years I've done stuff like this, and because we're in the Northeast, people really go right to the money questions typically. So I think some of it's regional, and at various times in my career, when we sit down with clients, I used to do the RDOS questions. You ever hear those?
Yes.
And then there was one, Baccarat questions or something, what does money mean to you? Things like that. And for whatever reason, we kind of dropped it just because people in the Northeast tend to be, and we have clients all over the country, but when I was really doing those questions, because I enjoyed it, because I thought, it gave great significance to what we were doing, and it was serving the client. And they've often, very rarely, connected their money with their heart, their mission. I'll tell you a really powerful story one listener friend shared with me in a few minutes, maybe one of the most powerful stories of my career. And this was after knowing them for 14 years. I never heard this story because we were doing trust and estate planning. So it's sort of like in the life cycle of a client in the Northeast, it's like those things come as you get to know them. But I think it's great that you do it right away. What are the three top questions you ask?
Yeah, I've identified one, and the first one is Mr. and Mrs. Client, Mr. and Mrs. Prospect. Answer this question without using your title. Who are you? Right. And so it forces them to say, oh, I can't respond, I'm a doctor. I cannot respond, I'm an architect. So it really forces them to sit back in their chair and think, man, who am I? Who am I? What unique set of skills, abilities, values, and passions do I have that other people don't, that I can create a vision behind for my future? So that's really the first question I ask. And if they can kind of just get behind that and understand that, holy smokes, I can't answer that question apart from my career, that's a stumbling block. And that's something that we can really help them overcome, to turn that stumbling block into a stepping stone by helping them identify who they are. The next question that we would simply ask is, well, if that's who you are, then where do you want to go? Right? It's the idea of reorienting and repurposing. It's finding the direction. It's laying out the action steps needed to begin to live out who you are, that vision for the future. It's finding a path, a vision for your future. And the next step, quite honestly, Josh, if you think about, where you work, you have team members that you work with 40, 50, 60 hours a week. You have office connections, you have friendships there. Upon retirement, those workmates go away. And so the question that you have to now be confronted with is, who's coming alongside me? Because ultimately your workmates are gone, you have to replace those workmates with playmates. And oftentimes we'll use our spouse for that, but our spouse doesn't want you in their hair the whole time. And so who are those important relationships, those key friendships that you need to establish? Who's coming alongside you in that desired, that bigger future? It could be family or grandkids or friends that you make at clubs or organizations or interest groups or church, but social connections are invaluable to a successful second half. And then lastly, we ask them, why is this important? Right? What is it that you are wanting to do? It's important for various reasons. You want to finish the race well. You want the rest of your life to matter on this earth. You don't want any regrets. It's also about helping those who are left behind. So often, Josh, we as financial advisors, we consider those estate planning documents good enough to leave our legacy to the next generation, and they can get all the money upon our death. But that legacy doesn't have to begin when you're gone. That legacy can begin today. We can write notes to a loved one. We can send a text to the grandkid. We can document that story, that experience that we had, that life lesson for the next generation to learn from. And we can just ask ourselves, who can be blessed by the generosity of our time and our talents and our treasure today?